Welcome to HFY Galactic Audiobooks, where we dive deep into thrilling sci-fi adventures, mysterious alien worlds, and mind-blowing encounters. In today's episode, we bring you a story of survival, unexpected bonds, and fierce alien warriors. Join Calb, a stranded human on the frozen wasteland of V029. As he saves an injured alien werewolf named Juno only to find himself caught in a dangerous new reality where Juno believes he is her mate. As they fight for survival, they'll face terrifying threats, unexpected alliances, and a battle to escape a planet that seems determined to keep them trapped. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more sci-fi thrillers and alien adventures. The air was thick with a biting cold, each breath of Calb's freezing body coming out in sharp, visible puffs as he trudged through the thick snow of V029. The icy wind whipped at his face, stinging like thousands of tiny needles. His worn jacket barely shielded him from the relentless cold, his boots sinking deeper with every step he took, as if the planet itself was conspiring against him. His fingers were numb, despite the thick gloves he wore, and each movement was slow, deliberate, fighting the numbing freeze that seeped into his bones. He wasn't sure how long he had been walking. The barren, endless white expanse stretched before him like an ocean of snow, broken only by jagged, ancient rock formations that jutted from the ground like the skeletal remains of some forgotten giant. The land was desolate, a true wasteland where only the desperate and the exiled came to vanish, never to return. Calb's eyes darted from side to side, scanning the horizon for any sign of shelter. The emergency beacon on his ship had barely given off a weak signal before it flickered out completely, leaving him stranded. His ship a wreck, a crumpled heap of metal and broken dreams, was far behind him now, and with no way to contact anyone, his survival depended on luck alone. His heart thudded in his chest with a sound of urgency, knowing that time was running out. Every step felt like it took him further away from hope. The storm outside intensified, howling with a hunger all its own. The cold was overwhelming, threatening to turn him into nothing more than a frozen corpse. His mind raced, searching for anything at all that could offer some form of shelter or salvation. Then, it caught his eye. A faint trail of crimson stains the snow ahead, barely noticeable against the whiteness but unmistakable. It was blood. Calb's breath caught in his throat. Blood meant something, or someone was in trouble. His survival instincts kicked in, pulling him toward the trail. His hand instinctively brushed against the grip of his pulse pistol, even though he knew it. The blood led him to a cave, the entrance partially hidden beneath layers of snow and ice. Calb's pulse quickened with a mix of dread and hope as he carefully approached the mouth of the cave. The wind outside died down, replaced by an eerie, unnatural silence. Inside the cave, the temperature was warmer, a slight comfort from the deathly chill outside. The howling wind was muffled, replaced by the occasional drip of water from above, the sound faint but unsettling in the quiet. The light filtering through the entrance was weak, casting dim shadows on the cave walls. It was then that he saw her, a figure hunched against the cave wall, her body slumped in a heap. Her breathing was shallow, coming in ragged gasps as though every breath was a battle she had already lost. Thick, pristine white fur covered her humanoid body, matted with blood that shimmered dark under the faint light. At first glance, Calb thought she was some sort of beast, but as his gaze met hers, he saw it. The unmistakable intelligence in her sapphire eyes. It was a look of pain, of exhaustion, but it was clear she wasn't just an animal. She was far more. His mind raced as his heart skipped a beat. Her ears twitched at his presence, long and pointed, flicking with every subtle sound. A deep gash ran along her abdomen, blood trickling sluggishly from the wound. Smaller cuts marred her arms and legs, evidence of a brutal battle that had left her on the brink of death. Her tail, thick and plush, curled protectively around her body as if shielding her from the world. Calb's instincts screamed at him to be cautious. She was clearly in pain, weakened and vulnerable, but her primal nature still radiated from her. She growled, a low rumble in her throat that vibrated through the air, the sound more animalistic than human. Yet, despite the sharp claws that twitched in defense, she didn't attack. Her gaze was unwavering, and in it, Calb saw both fear and something else, something far more dangerous than he could comprehend. For a moment, he hesitated, but then his training took over. She wasn't a threat, at least, not yet. And if he didn't act quickly, she would bleed out, and this place would become her tomb. With a grunt, Calb dropped to one knee, his fingers fumbling for the medkit strapped to his belt. He pulled out a cauterizing gel and a sterile bandage, working as quickly as he could. "All right, let's see what we've got here," he muttered to himself, although he wasn't sure she could understand him. The moment he reached for her side, she growled again, the sound deep and throaty. Her sharp claws twitched with a warning, but she was too weak to strike. Calb paused, meeting her fierce, unyielding glare with a steady, calm gaze. "Easy," he murmured, his voice soft but firm. "You're hurt. Let me help or you're not going to make it." Her chest rose and fell with slow, labored breaths. Her nostrils flared as she inhaled deeply, her scent mingling with the cold, the blood, the metallic tang of the cave. Calb was unsure what she was thinking, but after a long, agonizing moment, her body relaxed just slightly. That was enough for him to continue. Working quickly, Calb cleaned her wounds, applied the gel, and wrapped her in the bandages as best as he could with the limited supplies. The blood stopped flowing, but it was far from a perfect job. He wasn't a healer, just a medic, and right now, he was far from home and far from prepared. When he finished, he sat back on his heels, exhaling sharply as he studied her. Her eyes were half-lidded, exhaustion overtaking her as she drifted into unconsciousness. Despite everything, despite the cold, the blood, and the alien nature of her, there was something about her that felt familiar. He couldn't place it, but he knew this was no ordinary encounter. His instinct told him that V029 wasn't done with him yet. Not by a long shot. As he sat by the fire later that night, Calb's eyes never strayed far from her. She lay near the warmth of the crackling flames, her breathing slow and steady, her fur rising and falling with each inhale. Despite her injuries, she appeared peaceful in her sleep, but Calb wasn't convinced. There was too much danger still lurking out there. This was only the beginning. The hours passed in a blur, each moment stretched like an eternity as Calb worked tirelessly to tend to Juno's wounds. The fire crackled in the corner of the cave, casting long shadows that danced along the walls like ghostly figures, flickering and shifting with every gust of wind outside. He barely noticed the passage of time as he watched over her every shallow breath, the slow rise and fall of her chest, the way her fur, matted with blood, gleamed faintly in the dim light. Despite his best efforts, Juno's condition remained uncertain. There were moments when she stirred, her ears flicking at the slightest sound, her claws twitching in her sleep, but she remained unconscious, lost in a battle between life and death. Calb was no healer, and as he sat by the fire, his thoughts churned with frustration. What if he wasn't enough to save her? What if he failed her? But he couldn't afford to dwell on that. Now he had to keep going. He had no choice. It wasn't until hours later, when the fire had dimmed and the snow outside continued to swirl relentlessly in a storm's embrace, that Juno's eyelids fluttered open. Her sapphire eyes, still clouded with exhaustion and pain, locked onto Calb with an intensity that sent a chill down his spine. "You're awake," he murmured, a wave of relief washing over him. She blinked slowly, her gaze not leaving his. Her breathing was steadier now, though her body was still trembling from both the cold and the lingering effects of her injuries. She shifted slightly, pushing herself up against the cave wall, and in that moment, Calb could see the fierce willpower behind her. She wasn't just surviving, she was fighting. And something in that look made him pause. Her voice, though hoarse and weak, still carried an undeniable conviction. "You are my mate." Calb froze, his mouth going dry. The words hung in the air between them, and for a long, tense moment, he could only stare at her in disbelief. His mind struggled to process what she had said. "Mate? Wait, what?" he finally managed to say, blinking in confusion. "You saved me," Juno repeated, her voice softer but no less certain. "You touched me. That means you are mine now." Calb's heart skipped a beat, but it wasn't from affection, it was from pure shock. I helped you because you were injured," he stammered, running a hand through his hair, trying to grasp the absurdity of the situation. "That doesn't mean we're mates." Juno tilted her head slightly, her sharp ears flicking as she tried to understand. "You saved me. You are now bound to me. My kind does not owe debts. We claim what we are owed." The air in the cave felt thick, heavy with tension. The fire crackled, its warmth only accentuating the cold distance Calb now felt between them. "She's serious," he thought, watching her with a mix of confusion and concern. "But this is insane." His eyes searched hers, trying to find a way to make her understand the concept of human We don't work like that," he said, his voice calm but firm, choosing his words carefully. "We choose to be with someone. It's not about saving them or making a claim. It's about a connection. It's about choice." Juno's expression didn't shift. Her sapphire eyes studied him with quiet intensity, as if trying to decipher the strange logic he was speaking. "You say this is not how it works. But you touched me. That means you belong to me now." Calb let out a frustrated sigh. This wasn't something he could explain away easily. "It's not a claim or a bond," he said, the words growing more urgent. "It's about mutual understanding. It takes time. You can't just decide that because I help you, we're connected like that." Juno didn't respond right away. Instead, she stared at him, her sharp gaze never wavering, as if weighing his every word carefully. It was then that he realized she wasn't just confused, she was searching for something, trying to understand the deeper layers of what he was saying. Before he could say anything more, a low, rumbling growl echoed through the cave, breaking the heavy silence between them. Both Calb and Juno immediately went tense, their bodies instinctively alert. Calb's hand went to his pulse pistol, though he knew it was nearly drained of power. Juno's sharp ears twitched, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the shadows of the cave. The growl grew louder, closer, and then, with a sudden, bone-rattling roar, a massive creature burst from the shadows. Its eyes glowed an eerie, sickly yellow as it lunged toward them, its massive jaws snapping open to reveal rows of sharp teeth. Its body was covered in thick, jagged fur, bloodied and matted. Calb barely had time to react before the creature was on them. He fired instinctively, but the shot was weak, only grazing its thick hide. The beast barely flinched. It was fast, too fast. But then, Juno moved. With a primal snarl, she lunged into action, her body shifting with a fluidity and speed that was almost inhuman. Her claws extended, slashing through the air as she met the creature head-on. The air in the cave was filled with the sounds of a brutal struggle, fur and blood flying, claws clashing, and the beast's roars echoing in the confined space. Calb stumbled back, heart pounding, his mind struggling to catch up with what was happening in front of him. Despite her injuries, Juno fought with a strength and ferocity that Calb hadn't expected. She moved like a warrior, her every strike precise, every move deliberate. She wasn't just trying to survive, she was hunting, dominating. The beast fought back, snapping its massive jaws, but it was clear it wasn't prepared for someone like Juno. With a final, vicious strike, her claws tore through its throat, and the creature collapsed to the ground with a heavy thud, twitching as it breathed its last. Juno stood over the beast, her fur slick with blood, but none of it was hers. Her chest rose and fell with heavy breaths, her body brimming with the adrenaline of the fight. She turned slowly, locking eyes with Calb, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the fight was far from over. But there was something else in her gaze now, something deeper. "You saved me," she said, her voice hushed but intense, "and now you belong to me?" Calb's mind raced. He couldn't deny the pull he felt towards her, her strength, her resilience. He had watched her fight for her life, and in that moment, something inside him shifted. He wasn't just looking at an injured alien anymore. He was looking at someone who had survived, someone who didn't need anyone, but who had allowed him in anyway. In the midst of their dangerous surroundings, something unspoken had begun to form between them. Juno's actions, her vulnerability in the heat of battle, mirrored his own survival instincts, and for the first time in a long while, Calb realized that he wasn't as alone as he thought. Despite the tension and their differences, he could see the bond that was beginning to form between them. Neither of them had asked for it, but it was undeniable. As the night wore on, they settled by the fire again, the weight of their shared experience lingering in the air. Juno's gaze never left Calb, her eyes still intense but less possessive now, more contemplative. They had come from two different worlds, two different lives, yet they were here, together, fighting to survive. And for the first time since he crashed on this frozen planet, Calb felt something stir inside him, a sense of belonging, a bond forged not by necessity, but by choice. The fire crackled, the warmth filling the cave, but Calb knew that the storm outside wasn't the only thing they'd have to face in the days to come. There were far greater dangers ahead, and together, they would face them, whether they were ready or not. The wind howled around them, cutting through the frozen wasteland like a living thing, hungry and relentless. But the storm, as fierce as it was, seemed nothing compared to the storm brewing between Calb and Juno. With each passing moment, the tension between them grew, drawn taut by their unspoken bond. Juno's wounds were healing, though her body remained worn from the battle and the isolation of her exile. Yet, there was something about the way she carried herself now, strong, fierce, unyielding, that drew Calb in, despite his better judgment. Juno had made it clear. She didn't want to return to her old pack. The very pack that had cast her aside, made her choose between loyalty and freedom. Now, they were back, familiar, dangerous, and determined to reclaim what they believed was theirs. As they ventured toward the wreckage of Calb's ship, hoping to find something, anything, to signal for help, the air around them seemed to grow heavier. The ground beneath their feet crunched with every step, the silence of the snow-filled landscape broken only by the distant howls of the storm. Then, without warning, a growl split the air, a deep, primal sound that sent a shiver through Calb's spine. He stopped in his tracks, eyes scanning the horizon. Juno, too, froze. Her ears flicked forward, alert, and for the first time since they'd met, Calb saw the predatory glint in her eyes. "They've found us," she said, her voice low and full of finality. From the swirling snow came shapes, large, menacing figures, moving like shadows in a storm. As they drew closer, Calb's heart skipped. The pack was here. They were just as imposing as Juno had described, their massive forms looming in the blizzard. At their center, a figure stood tall, cold, and calculating, his amber eyes gleaming with the same dangerous intensity that Juno had once held. The pack leader. "You cannot run from us forever, Juno," the leader's voice rang out, deep and heavy, cutting through the storm like a blade. "You belong with us. You were never meant to be alone." Juno's tail flicked behind her, the fur bristling as she stepped forward, standing firm between Calb and the pack. "I made my choice," she said, her voice unwavering. "I do not belong with you anymore." The tension in the air was palpable, and Calb could feel it tightening around him like a noose. He wasn't sure what to expect, but as the leader's eyes met his, Calb realized he was about to be caught in the middle of something far bigger than he could comprehend. "We came to take you back," the leader said, his voice almost gentle, but there was an underlying menace in it. "You think you can survive without us? You have no idea what it means to be truly free, Juno. But you will learn. We are your pack. You are one of us." Juno's eyes narrowed, her fists clenching. "I am no longer part of your pack," she growled, her voice like a warning. Calb's hand instinctively reached for his pistol, though he knew it wouldn't be enough. His pulse quickened, the weight of the situation settling heavily on his chest. He wasn't a warrior, and he wasn't prepared to fight a pack of these creatures, but the thought of Juno being taken from him, he couldn't let that happen. The pack leader's gaze shifted back to Calb. "You fight for her, human?" His lips curled into a slight smirk. "Do you even understand what you're doing?" Before Calb could answer, Juno let out a low, ferocious growl. With one fluid movement, she lunged forward, her claws outstretched, aiming for the leader. The pack followed, charging toward them with the fury of a pack that had been denied their own. The battle erupted in a flurry of movement and chaos. Juno's claws clashed with the leaders, their strikes sharp and brutal. The air filled with the sound of snarls, the clash of fur and bone. Calb's eyes darted from one figure to another, trying to make sense of the melee unfolding before him. His body instinctively moved to shield Juno, though he was outmatched in every sense. Juno fought with a kind of desperation Calb had never seen. She wasn't just fighting for survival. She was fighting for her freedom. For her choice. And with each strike, Calb felt a surge of respect for her. She was a force, unlike anything he had ever encountered. But her wounds from earlier, the exhaustion from the days of survival, were catching up to her. It wasn't long before the pack leader managed to push Juno back, his amber eyes locking onto hers with a look that promised nothing but domination. "You will return," he snarled, his voice like a cold wind. But Juno stood firm, her body bruised and battered, but not broken. "No," she said, her voice sharp, unwavering. "I choose my path, and it is not with you." The wreckage of the ship lay before them, half buried in the snow. Calb worked quickly, his hands fumbling as he tried to salvage the beacon. His thoughts kept drifting back to the battle, to the way Juno had fought not just for herself, but for them. His fingers moved mechanically as he worked, but his mind was elsewhere, wrapped in the complexity of his feelings. Juno sat nearby, watching him closely, her sharp eyes never leaving him. She had chosen her path, and now she was choosing him. It wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about living together. When Calb finally managed to get the beacon working, he felt a wave of relief wash over him. The signal was faint, but it was enough. He was one step closer to getting off this planet, but the uncertainty that had been clouding his mind for days was now gone. Juno approached him, her steps quiet in the snow. She stopped just a few feet away, her gaze steady, unreadable. "You'll leave," she said, her voice low but certain. Calb hesitated. The thought of leaving her behind, of returning to a life that didn't include her, felt wrong. "I don't know if I want to leave," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. Juno's ears flicked, but she didn't speak right away. The storm outside howled louder, but inside the wreckage, everything was still. Time seemed to stretch, the silence between them heavy with meaning. Finally, Juno spoke, her voice softer now. "Then we stay." And in that moment, Calb realized something: the connection between them wasn't just about survival. It wasn't just about getting home. It was about a choice, a decision to live, to face the unknown together. And that, for the first time in a long time, felt like enough. As the beacon's signal pulsed faintly, they sat together in the wreckage, the storm outside forgotten. In the midst of the chaos and uncertainty, they had found something more: a bond forged not by chance, but by choice. What happens when survival instincts clashed with deep, unbreakable bonds? Will Calb and Juno escape the relentless dangers of V029, or will Juno's past come back to claim her? This thrilling journey through space and survival has just begun, and the mysteries of alien encounters are far from over. We'd love to hear what you think. What do you think of Juno's claim on Calb? Will they form a lasting bond, or is there more to their story? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more sci-fi thrillers and alien adventures. Stay tuned for the next chapter of the adventure.